everyone, I hope you're doing well. We are back in Todos Santos after a very short break, and we're going to pick up right where we left off, and we're going to use our $300 million endowment to get started on making the city's main university. I took inspiration for this build from a university in San Juan, which is the Rio Piedras campus of the University of Puerto Rico. Maybe you can see the resemblance to the area we're working with here, with that freeway on one side. As usual though, I'm not trying to do a recreation of any kind here, just taking little bits and pieces, plus the overall look, and just trying to get something a little bit similar. So we're starting here with one of the more modern looking buildings. I'm imagining that this is the Student Union building or something equivalent to that, so it's a little bit more recent, a bit more up to date and modern looking. So as we go through the build, I'm going to be surrounding all of the buildings with these campus paths and trying to fit them in a way that feels kind of natural. And I'm also going to try to integrate them into the entrances that are already in the building assets, just because I think that's kind of nice and really gets that little bit of realism when you're down there at the level of all the Sims walking around. You can see these paths actually, go places. And the main techniques I use to do this are just running the paths along the shape of the buildings. Sometimes I leave room for a little bit of green space or bike parking or something like that. And sometimes I just have it butt up right against the building. And then when I have curves in the path, I'll go in with Node Controller and I'll use either sharpen corners to get a nice angled 90-degree corner, or I'll change the node to be a bend type node. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but basically it gets rid of the little intersection decorations that pops up, like right here. So obviously there's this rail line that runs right through the middle of the university, which is kind of cool, but it also is a bit of an obstacle because the area is supposed to be quite pedestrian-centric. So how do we actually get people to cross this area? Obviously there are various solutions. There are level crossings, there are pedestrian bridges, and what we do there is just a little bit of a pedestrian bridge with kind of a clover leaf leading up to it, which I thought was kind of cool. And we're going to put a little bit of a park in there, which ends up being quite cool. And a lot of the details from this build kind of emerge like that. Like I didn't really have anything planned out for the most part. I knew I wanted to have a student union building and certain types of details, like areas with bike racks and that kind of thing. But I didn't necessarily know where I wanted to do specific things in specific places. So really just kind of going building by building and filling the area in with paths and details. It just kind of naturally came into being, which I suppose is sort of what happens in real life as well. Right, like you might originally have a plan for a university, but then eventually it'll grow, the number of students will grow, and you'll need to add new buildings. And so it just kind of develops naturally in that way. And speaking of the history of this area, I'm kind of modeling it off the real-life inspiration, which is basically a university that was started right about the beginning of the 20th century as a very small school. And I imagine that it's been developed in that way I was talking about over the last, 120, 130 years. And I've tried to reflect that by having a few sort of districts scattered throughout the university. So what we're moving on to now is going to be the quad. And this is part of the very, very original set of buildings that was made right at the beginning of the university's life. And this has these very nice Mediterranean university buildings as its core. And then there's kind of this more modern building that's tacked onto one end, which was probably one of their first attempts at expanding the university to allow for more students. The more modern building there is actually an Indian building, but I think it's generic enough that it fits the theme and it has a nice, light, simple color scheme, which I like. So I'm really just drawing each segment of path out little by little by little by little. And then when I see opportunities to connect it up with other paths where I've been doing the same thing, I just try to do that in a way that seems practical and logical. And that's really the whole process I use for just figuring out where all these paths go. Because I didn't just want like kind of a rigid grid of a path. I wanted something that looks a little bit more organic and fitting with the theme that this place has been added on to year after year. Another addition that I do to the path network is having these roads that occasionally encroach on the main area of the university. And that's basically road access, because a lot of these buildings, are going to need cars or trucks to get in there for deliveries or picking up and dropping off people or whatever you can think of. So occasionally I'll have these little cul-de-sacs, these little bubbles that come off the main road. And then I also use that to be able to give road access to some of the buildings that don't actually have road access. Obviously, with the campus DLC, you're able to put campus buildings along campus paths, but many of the buildings that I'm using are not actually designated as campus DLC buildings. So unfortunately, I have to do it the old-fashioned way and use roads to be able to have these buildings be functional. Now I have two of these cool, more modern-looking parking garage assets. The ones I've been using previously in the city are a little bit outdated at this point, so I installed these, and I'm very happy with how those look. And that's also going with the theme of this place expanding over time. They're going to adjust to Todos Santos as it becomes more car-centric over the years. And they're going to get these giant parking garages because that's just how it goes in Todos Santos. But it's not all bad for the pedestrians because they do occasionally get one of these little open-air pedestrian crossings, which I think look pretty cool. And it allows them to cross the road without risking getting run over, which I think we can all agree is a good thing. Now I have this little roundabout on the eastern side of the university, and I wanted to show off this very cool roundabout road that is on the workshop. Mod list in the description if you're interested. It was a little dark compared to the rest of my road textures, so I just lightened it up a little bit with, I believe, the Painter mod is what allows you to do that. Anyway, it's a pack of 3 roads. There's this one, then there's a pedestrian-free version where they're not allowed to walk along the edge. And then there's just a flat, plain road, which I absolutely love the look of. It has this sort of texture, but there's no curb. And we're going to be using that extensively starting in a couple episodes because it's just very flexible and it really fits into a lot of different situations. I'm pretty much just doing the standard roundabout type of decoration with some basic lines in the center, a couple of signs here and there. But there is this little bit of greenery in the center. And I was reading, apparently, some roundabouts are designed to deliberately block your view of the other side of the roundabout as you enter it in order to make you slow down. So there's a little bit of roundabout psychology there. But as I make roundabouts in various places in the city, I've been trying to implement that just to make them a little bit safer for our Sims who are honestly not very good drivers. Now I'm starting to place some more buildings here. I'm really trying to work my way through this whole palette. I had kind of a little bit of palette of the various buildings I thought might come in handy off screen. I'm just trying to fit them in a way that, first of all, gives them road access so that they can actually function where at all possible. Like this one here, I just kind of accept that I'm not going to have road access for it at first, although I think we do actually come back later and add a road that kind of snakes in there and allows it to be functional. But secondly, I'm also trying to kind of spread them out fairly evenly. Yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of hard to get the right arrangement and to get this sort of thing to look natural. I probably could have taken a little bit more inspiration from the real-life university and maybe even other universities, just to kind of get a sense of where the different sizes and shapes of buildings might go in a real school. But, you know, I did the best I could without just constantly going back and forth between the game and Google Maps. At some point, it just kind of turns into a recreation, which I'm not super interested in doing. Anyway, I have that kind of big building that clips into the rail station, which I don't know, I kind of like that. Like they have something sort of like the student union building, but a bit smaller and attached to the train station, so you could go there and, you know, hang out and wait for a train or whatever. Now going back to this older area of the university, we have this little chapel thingy, which looks kind of cool. It seems like it's, sorry you didn't get a very good view of it there, but it seems like it's supposed to be part of like a wall-to-wall sort of area. I imagine that maybe there used to be buildings there attached to it, and they were, you know, demolished for whatever reason as the university developed. But they left that the chapel there just because they didn't want to destroy it because of its historical value. We're going to add a nice little bit of a garden area and just spruce that area up a little bit and make it look a little bit more worthy of historical preservation than just a lone building standing by itself when we detail the university, which is going to be next episode. This is a 2-parter, although unlike previous 2-parters, I did actually remember to record cinematics in between the 2 episodes, so there will be cinematics later on in this episode. Now, I wasn't sure exactly how to transition from the main area of the university to the river. Really, this is a problem just with the design of the city. I might have mentioned this before, but I don't really want to have development along the river for the entirety of the city. So it's kind of just a natural area along most of its route. But I did want to have a little bit of like a boardwalk or walkway kind of area along the river, which I thought would be kind of nice. You could take a little stroll there and just enjoy the serenity of the river right next to the giant parking lots that we're going to add in there later on. And then I'm just adjusting the trees a little bit because I really don't like when they clip into bridges like that. Now, I've also tried to add crosswalks pretty frequently throughout the university area, especially when you have the campus paths that run right up to the road. I wanted to just make it so the Sims could cross right there. But then there are also just occasionally a crosswalk thrown in here and there, again, just to make it more walkable. And now I'm just throwing in a couple more buildings that I had in my little off-screen palette and adding in a few roads to give these buildings road access. And this road in particular also allows access to the parking garage, which I thought was kind of nice because we had that entrance there. So it'd be a little weird to not actually have road access to that part of the garage. And I love this feature of intersection marking tool where you can make the crosswalks wider. It just makes them a lot more flexible. And you know, some places, especially like this, you're just going to get bigger crosswalks because it's a more pedestrian-centered area. Now we're going over to this very cool triangular building, which I just thought looked like something that you'd find maybe built in like the 60s or 70s on a university campus. So we're going with this. I just think it adds a really nice look, especially when you look at it from above. It really stands out from the rest of the buildings. But just very quickly surrounding it with campus path. And then in this little green area here, I'm just adding some desire paths, and that's something I'm going to do in a few areas of the city. I think I've talked about them before. Basically, people will take the shortest, simplest path from A to B, even if it involves walking over areas of grass or other places that don't have an official trail. And that's what a desire path is. So I want to add those in here and there where it looks like people would walk, but there aren't already official pathways. If you've ever been on a university campus of this nature, you'll definitely have encountered these sorts of things, where if there's any green space, it'll be crisscrossed with dirt paths. And you know, they get all nasty and muddy in the spring if you're in a place that has springs like that. But anyway, that's desire paths. So now I'm moving on and adding a few more official paths just to fill in this area a little bit. Although I am trying to leave plenty of areas of green space, of course. Now we're doing those parking lots I was talking about before. Obviously, not an ideal setup to have these giant parking lots taking up valuable space inside the university, but what are you going to do? I'm just basing it off of real life. When I'm using parking lot roads, I usually prefer to have the entrance lanes go into the middle of a segment of parking lot, if that makes any sense. Because when you attach it to the end, it just kind of rounds it out and makes it look pretty weird and unrealistic. So I usually just go in the middle. You can sharpen corners if you want to get a little bit extra space there for your parking spaces. Other than that, I'm just filling it in like usual, although I did want to use some of this blank space just to try to see if I could fit in a few more spaces here and there. Obviously, if they're going to be paving this land over for parking, they're going to want to get their money's worth. Now we're starting off on a new area of the university. I'm not sure why I came up with this, but I thought it would be cool to have a little pedestrian bridge that crosses from the student union over to this raised area. So you could cross the bridge and then you just end up on flat land and there's no like elevator or whatever leading up to the crossing. So what we're going to have over here is the main dormitory area where you'll find obviously most of the university's dorms. Now, I thought it would make sense to have more ways to access the university than just crossing this bridge, so we have a little ramp here that runs down to road level, if you wanted to go down there for whatever reason. And then, of course, there are also just the roads themselves that access this area. You could walk on the sidewalk there as well. And I'm just connecting all this up with this very nice-looking path. I wanted to do something different than the campus path from the campus DLC that I've been using for the rest of the university. I just thought it had a nice, generic look, but it still has a nice texture on it, so it doesn't look too out of place. And then for the ramp over here, just trying to make it look a little bit nicer. You know, it looks quite strange with just the cliff texture there. So I'm just leveling out the bottom with a little bit of road And then I'm using this very cool Ronix retaining wall asset to make the cliff texture go away and replace it with something a little bit nicer and more befitting a university of this university stature. And then underneath in this little concrete area down here, just have these little, I don't know why, but I have these bushes down here, I guess just to cover up the gap. And I was feeling a little bit lazy, filling in this triangular area with a little bit of woods just to kind of keep the dorms a little bit separate from the rest of the university. And I don't know why, but I decided to use this bridge abutment asset just to make it look like there's a little bit of concrete support here, I guess. It has a little bit of a worn look, which I think kind of fits in with the vibe of this little ramp area. And then, of course, underneath the ramp is the location where unscrupulous people throw their trash. Now, hopping over to the other side of the dorm area, I had another triangular area that I didn't quite know what to do with, so I put in a custom parking lot here, because it just seemed like I needed more parking. And it also really didn't seem like a place to put a bunch of buildings or something like that. So we got a giant parking lot. These are functional parking lot assets, so cars do park here, which is kind of nice. And then I'm just doing the basic parking lot job with some fences and some lights and some good old stain decals. I also go the lazy route with these parking bumpers, just using prop line tool to drag those out. And then some of these simple industrial lights, just to give it a nice orange glow at night. And really fits the sort of rundown look here, even though it's not a particularly rundown area. So we've got the dorms laid out. Some of these are meant to be just normal dorms, and some of these apartment-looking buildings would maybe be like married student housing or that sort of thing. Anyway, we're getting toward the end of the episode, and you might notice that there's a distinct lack of details, and there's no lighting pass that's been done. And that's because, like I mentioned before, the entirety of next episode is going to be dedicated to detailing this area, and also filling in all the surrounding area with some residential zoning. Now, I add this stadium, and we end up getting the Purple Chirpers is the main team for the university. One negative side effect of that is that almost every sim in the city now wears purple. So I might have to change that, but I really do like purple. So what are you going to do? By the way, this is the first voiceover I've recorded since the channel hit 1,000 subscribers. So I wanted to say thank you to everyone who is a new subscriber or has been subscribed for years now. I'm really glad you're here. And as always, I really appreciate your time. Bye-bye.